So we have a great program as usual for you this morning with Los Altos Police Department Captain Katie Krauss and Art Whipple representing Resilient Los Altos. And I'm going to start by introducing our guest speakers. Captain Krauss attended UC Santa Cruz and holds a BA in Environmental Studies and a Master's in Education. She was a school teacher in San Jose and Long Beach before pursuing her career in law enforcement. Katie joined the Los Altos Police Department in 2011 after spending 3 years with the San Jose Police Department. During her tenure with Los Altos, Katie has served as a patrol officer, field training officer, police agent, and patrol sergeant. She was selected to be the school resource officer where she spent 3 years teaching the DARE program and educating children about alcohol and drug use. She also taught the Parent Project program, working with parents to strengthen skills to assist in dealing with difficult situations involving adolescents. Katie was also instrumental in initiating community enriching activities such as pumpkin carving with a cop, the Yes campaign, rewarding youths exhibiting safety, Cops Love lemonade stands, and Popsicle Patrol. And Katie, and just FYI, everyone, that's how she prefers to be known, as Katie rather than Captain Krauss, has remained engaged with the community youth by providing police department tours, hosting the local high school district job shadow program, as well as participating in annual Silicon Valley Shop with a Cop holiday day event. Katie graduated from the Los Altos Police Leadership Program and also served on a county specialized enforcement team that handles narcotics crimes. As captain, Katie oversees the operations division, and operations is composed of patrol, investigations, traffic, canine handler, and the reserve divisions. I don't know what else is left, but Captain Krauss appreciates the close working relationship between the police department and the Los Altos community. She looks forward to continuing to strengthen this relationship as police captain. And Mr. Art Whipple earned a BS in electrical engineering from the University of Washington and an MBA from Santa Clara University. Art spent most of his professional life in Silicon Valley, initially in various engineering roles, but spent most of his career in executive positions, including as a VP of engineering, CFO, COO, and CEO at technology companies. Another slacker. He was also the president of a seawater desalination company in the Caribbean, and his last role before retiring was as president of the American operations of a Russian software company. Art retired in April 2020. He has been a resident of Los Altos since 1982 and was very active in PTA while his daughter Ashley was in Los Altos Public Schools. Ashley attended Mountain View High School, and Art volunteered to help the MVHS music department with recording their music. He still continues that effort that has produced about 60 CDs that has raised more than $1 million for scholarships for music students. Congratulations, Art. He started his involvement with emergency preparedness in Los Altos by using his amateur radio skills to be of service to a block action team located near University in El Monte. He soon trained to become a community emergency response team CERT member. And thank you all the CERTs and BATs and ham operators for being here this morning, and was part of the founding leadership of Resilient Los Altos, a fiscally sponsored project of the Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation. Thank you again, Adine. Art is a member of the Financial Commission for the City of Los Altos, but this morning he's not here in that capacity, right?
That's correct.
So please join me in welcoming Captain Krauss and Art Whipple this morning. So Captain Krauss, Katie, over to you to tell us what you would like to say about emergency preparedness and lessons learned from the recent events of this winter.
Okay.
are we going to go through the questions, or you want me just to talk in generalities?
If you want to talk in generalities at first, and then I'll do the
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
You.
As the police operations captain, it's under my supervision is all of patrol. So when we have storms, emergency response, anything of that nature, I'm the one who oversees that. As most of you know, we did have an emergency manager or coordinator before. We have not filled that position. It's been vacant for approximately 1 year. We are working right now in the new budget cycle that's coming out to bring that position back and fill it, so that we have someone at the PD and the city whose focus is going to be on emergency response and emergency coordination with Resilient Los Altos. So that's the direction we are heading as we, after the storm season, realize that we have some areas we could certainly improve and do better. And we want to have someone in place to help us make those improvements. So I'll turn it over to Art for his intro.
Okay, well, let me give you a little background on Resilient Los Altos, or RLA as we call it. It's an organization of volunteers in Los Altos and surrounding areas working on emergency preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. Our volunteers fall into 3 groups: hams, certs, and bats. The Los Altos Amateur Radio Emergency Service has been active in Los Altos for more than 50 years, providing communication services when other communication infrastructure fails. We currently have about 75 radio operators on our roster. Our community emergency response team members have been trained to FEMA standards, primarily by the Santa Clara County Fire Department, in physical emergency response, including light search and rescue and disaster medicine. We have about 125 certs currently on our roster. Our block action teams, or BATs, organize their neighborhoods to be prepared to support their neighbors in a significant emergency. They know if there are doctors or nurses in their neighborhoods, and they know who has generators and chainsaws. They know neighbors who have access and functional needs. There are about 235 BAT members on our roster. Probably those numbers don't maybe not add up because we only have about 375 altogether, because many of our people are twofers or threefers, as you heard from some of the people who introduced themselves a few minutes ago. We have an excellent working relationships with the city of Los Altos and the Santa Clara County Fire Department, and we drill to maintain communication and other skills with Santa Clara County. Under the RLA banner, we are working to develop working relationships with the Los Altos School District, faith-based organizations, Neighborhood Watch, businesses, commercial property owners, community-based organizations, and allied health organizations. RLA operates as ears and eyes for the city. In an emergency, BATs and certs will assess their neighborhoods. Amateur radio operators located at reporting sites in the 11 zones in Los Altos will communicate with the radio operators at the city's Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, to provide data for the efficient allocation of scarce resources within the city. At other times, certs and hams support the city at events like the Pet Parade tomorrow, the Art and Wine Festival in early July, and the Festival of Lights Parade after Thanksgiving. So look for us and say hello. We'll be in the yellow and green vests. Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, now I have a number of questions for our guests, and then we'll open it up to questions from the participants after that. So Katie, how long have you been a captain, and what does that job entail on a daily basis?
I've been a captain for 4.5 years now. Like you mentioned earlier, I'm the operations captain. We currently have 2 captains, operations and administration. So operations deals with all of the operations of the police department, including patrol, traffic, SWAT. My schedule varies day to day. There's a lot of variety, but as a lot of you probably know, a lot of our days are filled with meetings. I have a lot of meetings on a variety of topics, including technologies, budget, PD operations. We have had some recent vacancies in the police department due to some retirements and medical retirements and people just leaving the area. And we actually had 8 vacancies. So we were running a little short, so my job duties kind of expanded out into some other areas I normally wouldn't handle. So I've been working a lot on recruitment, hiring, and training to fill those 8 vacancies. I'm happy to say that we are down to our final 2 who should be starting next month. So we will be fully staffed. And then I do some of the activities with the school, including school assemblies and active assailant trainings for all the school staff currently. And so that's pretty much what I do, a lot of meetings, and then try to get out in the field as much as I can.
Great. Thank you so much. So you said that was the police department role in the emergencies of last winter? So the, all the storms and the power outages and the trees down and all of that, was that because there is not currently an emergency coordinator, or do you normally have a role?
So we normally have a role. The role of the emergency coordinator obviously is normally to partner with Resilient Los Altos and do trainings for the community and the city employees. So it doesn't change the fact that we don't have the emergency coordinator. We still are doing the same role we did before. It's just that we're sharing those duties here at the police department. So that's kind of fallen on me. And then Resilient Los Altos has picked up a lot of the job that she used to do in coordinating our volunteers, and they've been amazing in that. So we're a full service police department, and we've always handled those kind of calls. It's just this winter we had a lot more need, and the storms were obviously a lot more intense this season. So I'm going to use the March 14th storm as an example, though I know the New Year's Day storm was another large one as well. So I'm just going to go through kind of some of what happened during that storm from a PD perspective and the number of calls we went to. So just on the 14th alone, from 10 o'clock a.m. to 10 o'clock p.m., so it's just that window there alone of 12 hours. And we had 204 storm-related incidents that were put into our computer-aided dispatch system. Most of the calls were for wires down, trees down, and traffic signals being out. Other storm calls, we did have some collisions, and we had a lot of alarm calls. When the winds go up, then people's alarms start malfunctioning. So we have to go check those alarm calls out as well. As with most of the city, the police department and the city hall did lose power. Initially, our backup power generator was not functioning. Public Works came out to assist us and got that back up and running, because we need to have power here at the PD to run our dispatch center. So that did get resolved, luckily. And signals were out.
How long did that take?
So our emergency power, so basically we have an emergency power system that lasts, I think, for 30 minutes. So it'll run dispatch for 30 minutes, and then our emergency generator is supposed to kick in. So what was happening is that we had that window of 30 to 40 minutes was the emergency generator was not kicking in. So we had to have MSC, and they responded immediately and got it turned on. I want to say we had about 5 to 8 minutes to spare before we were going to have to transfer all of our calls to Palo Alto or Mountain View. So we have a backup plan always that they would just take over all our calls until we resolve the situation. The signals were out all over the city. We didn't have the PD resources to conduct traffic control at different signals that are out. And we typically don't. When a signal goes out, we don't go out and do traffic control. We will, it's supposed to be a 4-way stop, right? But when there's no power anywhere, the lights don't blink. They don't do anything. They're just out. And so Public Works helped us by going out, and they put up some different stop signs in the major intersections, so people were aware that they needed to stop. As you know, cell service was highly impacted, and most communication for PD had to be done over the radio, because our personal and our work cells went down. Even though we have FirstNet, which is a special network just for law enforcement, that system went down as well temporarily. So it took us a while to get our cell service back up and running. I know other cell carriers were also out for residents for a long period of time, with residents having to use the parking lot at Woodland Library to gain access to Wi-Fi. They still had cell service there. With the trees down and live wires on the road, we used our personnel just to put cones and flares out to block off affected intersections. Again, we didn't have enough personnel to keep someone at every single intersection, so we just picked the major ones. So we did, because we couldn't man every intersection impacted, we did have calls of residents. People were moving barricades to access roadways, and there were live wires down. So that was a big safety concern for us. We sustained damage to one police vehicle. It was struck by a falling tree while it was occupied by 4 of our police personnel. Luckily, no personnel were injured. The car just had some scrapes from the tree falling in it. And then as the storm progressed and our calls for service just started stacking up, we did call in additional resources. We called in extra officers to come in and work. And in that 12-hour time period, we logged 32 overtime hours of other personnel who had to come in and start handling those calls. So that was just the March 14th storm. The New Year's Day storm was very similar. I want to say in that one, we had 280 calls for service in that time period, which is enormous for us. I mean, our patrol staffing is usually 4. We have 4 people working at a time, sometimes 3. So to have 3 to 4 people working 300 calls in a day, we had to use our traffic team. We used our detectives. The captain was out shagging calls, and we ended up having to call people back. So that was just our storm response for the 14th alone, but it was very similar on New Year's Day.
That's quite impressive, and I'm sure you were all exhausted afterwards.
They were.
And just so everyone knows, we reached out to the city manager, Gabe England, about who should represent the city during this presentation, and he's the one that represented Captain Krauss, and she helped us find Art Whipple. And so what was the role of Resilient Los Altos during the winter storms?
So we do things in our neighborhoods to take care of neighborhoods, but our relationship with the city involves with them actually having an event and activating us. So Katie has all of the contact information that she can get a hold of several different members of the leadership of RLA to get us going. We talked about we were basically on alert for some of the calls in March, but we stand by ready to act as soon as we can. But in our neighborhoods, we do other things. We open garage doors for people whose electric garage doors won't work anymore, or keep a generator running so that people can have their refrigerated medicines in a refrigerator that still is working. But we didn't actually get called out for these storms.
Yep. We actually had a meeting right after the 314 storms because we were supposed to have another storm. And I met with Resilient Los Altos and we talked through what the roles would be if we had another big storm. Because what I came to realize after I looked at the number of calls and our personnel and how stretched thin they were was that we had, Resilient Los Altos was the team of volunteers that, it's certainly we should have, and in the future we'll call on them to help do the setting up barricades, manning intersections, because it's a whole nother set of bodies that we can use, and also damage assessments in neighborhoods. So we had already had a plan in place that if the storms came through on the 28th, which is another date we were supposed to have them, they were going to be activated to come and assist. And we didn't end up having to need them, but we've now established those relationships to do that in the future. So we are, that was one of the lessons learned, was to reach out to the resources we have here.
Okay, that's good. And that's a nice transition to the future. So I was going to ask you the next question, which is what's the role of each of Resilient Los Altos and the role of the city in preparing for such situations in the future?
So I'll talk first and I'll let Art take it over. So like I said, we're trying to work to hire our emergency manager, but in the interim, RLA has been a tremendous partner in helping us stand up our emergency response volunteers, including our search hams and bats. So the PD has been working with city staff on messaging out both during and before a storm. So we work with our communications team at City Hall to start sending out messages pre-storm on what they could do to start preparing, right? Cleaning out their storm drains, checking, make sure they have emergency kits ready. And then the biggest thing was giving people ahead of time the important phone numbers to have on hand for making those calls, right? Emergency numbers for PG&E, for Public Works, and then explaining to them, when do we call PG&E? When do we call Public Works? When do we call the police department for lines down, trees down, and wires down? And so trying to put that out ahead of time. Public Works sends out messaging about their sandbag stations that they have. City staff at Public Works has also done a tremendous job of doing tree assessments. They're going around the city and seeing if there are trees that are diseased or weak that might need to be taken out prior to storms coming through, or limbs that just need to be trimmed back to prevent the number of wires down that we had. And so that's the Public Works role in it as well. And also the storm drain cleanouts that the Public Works team does. And so we've had a good relationship with Public Works and working through some of these problems.
Art, over to you.
Yeah, I think we're doing similar sorts of things. We're trying to be prepared always. We drill routinely to, excuse me, to be able to work on these sorts of things. Excuse me. The issue for us really is to make sure that our neighbors are safe. We in our neighborhoods, we pay attention to people and see what's going on. Uh, One of the things that's going to be an issue, as we all saw in these last storms over the winter, was that the cell services that we rely on are only adequate when normal times are going on. They only set up their systems to be able to handle about 5% of the call volume. And when 10 or 15 or 20% of the people are 100% after a big event, the cell phones aren't going to work. So what you want to be able to do is to communicate with your neighborhoods, with the understanding that if there's a really significant emergency, our city of 30,000 people will be served very well by the the handful of police and fire that we have. But you're basically on your own for a while after these big storms and earthquakes and fires happen. So we want people to be able to take care of themselves in the neighborhoods.
I'm glad you mentioned earthquakes and fires, because I was going to ask you, what about other kinds of emergencies beyond storms? And so you already addressed that. So the next question is it true that legally jurisdictions that have experienced an emergency must complete an after action report? If so, did Los Altos declare the storms and resulting down trees and power outages to be an emergency? Why or why not?
So yes, the California, the Code of Requirements is Title 18, there's Section 2450. It does require that any city or county that declares a local emergency, they do have to transmit an after action report to Cal OES within 90 days of the incident. I know Chief Averett currently has completed an after action report and getting all the city departments' feedback. What that includes is how many personnel responded, the man hours worked, number of calls responded to, any equipment failures or needs that we have, and then logistical or communication needs, and then any damage to same as city property. So Chief Averett worked with all the different department heads to gather that information. I don't know on the status of where that report is at this time, but I do not believe, and I do know that we have some city council members on here, I do not believe that we declared a local emergency. I know Gavin Newsom declared different emergencies for different counties, and I think the county might have done an emergency declaration. I do not believe that the actual city of Los Altos declared a local emergency because the county had already done it for the entire region.
And do you know if the report where does it go?
It goes to Cal OES, so the Office of Emergency Services gets that report, and then they put it all together. And then I know that we also collected data on any homes that were sustained damage, private homes or personal property. People can also put in those reports into Cal OES as well when we have different storms. So that was also more information that we reached out to Nick Zorns, our Development Services Director, to try to find out who had reported damage to their homes, carports, roofs, things of that nature.
Fences?
Fences. There was a lot of fences down. I don't know I'm not sure if the fences count or not, because that would be an awful lot. I know.
Yeah, because we had a fence down. Just some people are sharing some of their personal experiences, and that was the major damage that we had here. And I guess I'm glad for the first time that we have a carport rather than a garage, because there was nothing to open it. We could get in and out easily. But
our RLA has a similar issue. Whenever we are activated by the city, as we will be for the Pet Parade and the Art and Wine Festival, we do an after-action report as well. And those are in our files. If anybody's interested, I'm sure we'd be able to share them with you.
Okay, that's good to know. And does the city council have any role with, and maybe Jonathan and Sally know better than you do, Katie, with those reports?
If they want to answer, I know they would have to declare the local emergency as the but as far as the report, I believe once it's completed, they will be presented with the after action report, but they were also getting regular updates from the city manager on the storm response and the storm damage and the aftermath of it. So I know they were getting that information as city council as well, so they were aware.
Okay, So this was a really tough year for the electrical grid, and many people in Los Altos lost power for many times and for 3 or 4 days at a time. What advice do you have for preventing this situation from occurring in the future?
Unfortunately, we have very little control as a city or police department on electrical grid and loss of power, right? Because that's a PG&E function. Most of our lines here in town did go down due to trees or limbs falling. So short of cutting down all our beautiful trees, there's probably not a whole lot we can do. But I would say that homeowners can work to maintain their trees as much as possible with regular trimmings. If you have a sick or possibly diseased tree, have an arborist come out and do an assessment and see if it's at risk of falling and might need to be removed. As I mentioned earlier, the PD and City Hall did lose power as well, and we had to work off generator power till it was restored. And it's a difficult situation for everyone involved. And I do know that the city is working on new developments and having to put underground wires, which certainly would help with the power lines getting knocked down by tree limbs. So I know that's the way PG&E is trying to, the direction they're trying to go is undergrounding all their lines or most of their lines to prevent these kind of things from happening.
Is Los Altos high on the list for that sort of thing? Or, I mean, I haven't seen any PG&E people around doing that here.
So I do know there's different rules on it when new developments go in about undergrounding lines for new ones, right? As far as going through and doing the ones that are currently existing, I am not sure where we're at on the priority list for PG&E currently.
Okay. On the RLA side, we also worry about the issue of being able to provide power, and we were at the police open house that we had back in the end of April. And we had a big booth actually on how to do this, and you can do this for $100 to a couple tens of thousands of dollars, depending on what you want to do. Los Altos isn't very easy to get standby emergency generators permitted, but certainly people are putting in Tesla walls and battery systems and solar backup and those sorts of things. But that's at the very high end of what you can do. At the very low end, it's an issue of, can you get a small solar generator to charge your cell phone? Can you find batteries and ways of being able to have flashlights? Anybody that's interested in in that presentation information that we had, either, I guess you certainly can email me at resilientlosaltos@gmail.com, no spaces, resilientlosaltos@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to send you a PDF of the things that we put on for what you can do for a couple $100.
And you sent quite an extensive list of things to us as well, and I think we're going to put that in the chat.
Okay.
So if people want to have it right now, and everything from a few $100s to many thousands of dollars, depending on what you want to do.
Yeah.
So back to the question of the grid, practically speaking, do the limitations of the grid have what limitations do they have on our ability to implement policies such as reach codes, for example? Would more widespread electrification of homes and businesses help in the event of a future emergency, such as the ones that occurred this past winter?
So I had read this question ahead of time, and this is a great question for our sustainability coordinator at the city. They are the ones doing the reach codes, and they obviously have more of an expertise in this area. Obviously, there's concerns from residents that if we do more electrification and get rid of some of our gas appliances, that when the electricity goes down, then they're going to lose more of their appliances. So I do know that is a concern. This is not my area of expertise, so I don't feel very comfortable responding to this, just because I don't know that much about the electrification and the reach codes to speak on this topic.
Okay.
And I'm not an expert either, but I would say that what we have right now is that the gas lines are buried and the electrical service is not. So the one that's more likely to be injured in a fire or an earthquake or a flood are the above head electrical stuff. So the natural gas stuff is valuable at this point. So I think we need to be intelligent about how what power we use as a community, because I do think everybody here agrees that we need to find a way to limit our use of carbon-based fuels.
Okay, thank you. Art, is it a fact that is the fact that about a quarter of the city has BAT cert leaders sufficient to deal adequately with a future emergency of the sort that you just described?
Not at all. No, I think that's one of our primary focuses is to find a way to continue to grow the number of bats, the number of neighborhoods. There's a map that we have when we show up in public that shows where the bats are in the 11 zones that we've divided up Los Altos into. And, there's we have about 25% of the neighborhoods have registered bats and certs and hams in them, but it's not enough. We need more. But the remarkable part is that when we show up to try and get people to be interested in doing this, mostly they won't. They're not interested. They don't want to talk to you. I walk around at various events trying to hand out alert SCC cards so that I'm not asking for any money. I'm not asking for a donation. I just said, please take this card. Please sign up for this. It's free. And this is how you're going to find out if something bad has happened to your neighborhood. And they won't take it. Women with children often will. Men or women without children just aren't interested. So we need to continue to grow this. Yes.
Good. And if there's one thing you could recommend to residents to do to best prepare for the next emergency, what would it be?
Well, I'll go first on this one because I have a very specific one in mind. How you behave in an emergency is initially about how you emotionally behave in the situation. Are you going to be in an appropriate mind for you to be able to deal with the situation for yourself and for your family and for people around you? If you panic, you're not going to make it. So I would suggest everybody, this is a great book. Read it. It's $15 on Amazon in paperback. What it'll tell you to do is to think about the fact that in an aircraft accident, only about 85% of the people survive aircraft accidents. The reason they survive is because they keep their wits about them and they find a way to get out of the aircraft, right? Merrill Lynch spent a lot of time working on evacuating the towers at 9/11, and Cantor Fitzgerald did not. Merrill Lynch saved all but 3 of their employees. More than 1,000 people got out because they talked about what would happen if there was a big fire or some sort of a thing, and Cantor Fitzgerald didn't. So your mindset is critical. So let's see if we can get this into the chat, because I think this is incredibly valuable for people to just think about what you're going to do in an emergency.
Okay. And I was going to ask you if it was in the library, and somebody put in the chat that it is, in fact,
Good.
in the library.
And what's the name of the book?
It's called
The Unthinkable.
The Unthinkable: Who Survives when Disaster Strikes and Why. It's the why question that's most important for you people to know.
And then I would share, it's hard to say one thing, but obviously it's preparation ahead of time. Have your emergency supplies prepared ahead of time and accessible. I know that I prepared an emergency tub at my house and then shoved it in the bottom of some rack in my garage that quickly got blocked by other things. And I thought, well, that was really silly. In an emergency, I can't access it quickly. So Resilient Los Altos has a lot of resources, including what should go into an emergency supply kit, as well as your go bag. It's called what's the name of it, Art? There's a special name for those bags.
A whoosh kit, WUSH. Wake up, something happened.
Yeah. So, and they actually do classes on what to put in your whoosh kit. And it's, the important things you need right now. But the important things really important to have ahead of time is a flashlight with batteries, fresh, already in it, right? Water source. I would say for people to have some kind of food source that's not in their refrigerator accessible, because again, when you lose power, you want to limit opening your fridge as much as possible, right? Because you don't want to lose all your food in it. So have some food that's not in your refrigerator that's accessible. Cell phone charging banks, have them already charged, because you're not going to be able to charge your cell phone. I'm saying we have Wi-Fi, but maybe we don't have power. So things like that, being prepared ahead of time. And then I'm also going to plug what Art was talking about, which is preparation in your notification systems, right? Signing up for Alert SCC, knowing that that's how we push information out, signing up with, Nixle and some of the other ways the city pushes information out. Join our Facebook page for the city of Los Altos, where we pushed out a ton of information during the storm. So having that stuff ahead of time, so you're not trying to search for that storm related or emergency information. But doing that all before the incident happens is crucial, right? Because you can't go put your emergency kit together, or you're going to, when a storm is a day away, because then you're going to be fighting all the crowds at Costco trying to buy all the bottled water and all that stuff that you need. So preparation is key, and Resilient Los Altos puts on great classes with our fire department and some other ways just to get yourself prepared for emergencies ahead of time.
And I would add one thing to Katie's list of things, have a pair of shoes under your bed. If we have a big earthquake, there's going to be a lot of broken glass. And if you start walking around your house without some shoes on, you're going to be one of the people that isn't helping anybody.
Yeah. Or yourself even.
Or yourself.
Yeah.
So a pair of shoes under the bed.
Okay. So any closing remarks, Katie and Art?
Yeah, thank you for having us here. This obviously is a really important conversation. I think we realized through the storm season in 2023, different holes that we need to work on as a police department, and then how to work better with Resilient Los Altos to make our response even better in the future, and what resources we need to have in place. Obviously, Art will probably plug this too. We would love to have more disaster service workers, HAMs, BATS, CERTs, volunteer for these programs so we have additional assistance in the future. What Art mentioned is true. If we were to have, the storms are a little bit different, but if we were to have a major earthquake that impacts the roads to get to Los Altos, we have 0 officers who live within the city of Los Altos. So us trying to get here for emergency response is going to be delayed. You will have the officers who are working already. They won't be able to leave, but the rest of our resources trying to get into Los Altos, if there were major damage to the roadway, is going to be delayed. And again, we only have a limited staff. And I know we can reach out to mutual aid with surrounding agencies, but if we had a widespread disaster like an earthquake, they're going to be busy with their own jurisdiction. So what Art mentioned as far as neighborhoods are going to have to be self-sustaining for some period of time as the police resources get gathered and fire resources, and we have to triage and go to the calls that are most important. So, if somebody is risk to life, that's a priority. But if you have a broken leg, that's not high on the list with risk to life. So we need the other people in the neighborhood, the CERTs, the BATS, the HAMs, to be able to help treat that person until we can triage and get to them. So having more volunteers is key for us in a city like ours, where a lot of our city staff and PD staff commute in. And so that is certainly a concern that I know Resilient Los Altos, that's one of the reasons they want to really beef up their volunteer team, is because they know it's going to be hard for staff to get here to serve in an emergency if it was a widespread disaster.
And I guess without now being a Debbie Downer here, we haven't had a good disaster here since Loma Prieta 30 years ago. We've had an entire generation of people that have managed. The worst we've had is if anybody remembers back the rain we had in 1982, 83, which called Love Creek and all the other stuff that was going on. We've been very, very well served by Mother Nature for the last 30 years. People are getting not thinking about what it means. So we don't need you to spend 4 hours a week. If you spent 4 hours a year thinking about what you're going to do in an emergency, it would be really valuable.
And I know, Art, a question just came in the chat about the recommended amount of time residents should be prepared to self-manage. What was we had talked about this. What was that time?
Yeah, 3 to 7 days is, the people here in Los Altos are probably better off to serve than a lot of other places in the country. But we also are liable to have a lot more damage. We have if it's an earthquake for sure, or it's a wildfire, it's going to be a problem. Water is going to be tricky. None of our water comes from here, right? If the piping from to Crystal Springs Reservoir is gone, we're going to have a hard time keeping people hydrated. Hopefully, everybody knows after a big quake, don't use your hot water because you're not going to want to drink it. It's a great storage tank. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both for the great information. I'd like to now open it up to the attendees for questions. I know there have been some put in the chat, And if you are willing to ask the question out loud, that would be a help rather than me trying to have to scroll through and find them. So please raise your virtual hand and I'll call on you. And remember that it's one question per person until everybody has a chance to ask their questions, and no speeches or commentary, please. So do we have any questions? I know there were some in the chat.
I see a couple hands raised.
Okay, so Scott, you're up first.
All right, thank you, Marie, and thanks, Katie and Art. And Art and the Hams, thank you every year for the Art and Wine Festival, all the help that you provide there. And I wanted to kind of ask a question around that. As we all may know, the cellular service, at least in downtown Los Altos, is very sketchy, depending on where you might be standing at any one time. Add 50, 60,000 people to the downtown and it becomes almost non-existent. It's been very difficult for our vendors and our artists to take credit card payments, but it's also down to on my cell phone I look, it says emergency call only. Is there have you had any issues? Is there any concern about this, and is there any future fix for it?
Well, there are two elements to this. One is that the FEMA, I believe it was FEMA or the FCC, came up with the idea of an improved cellular network for first responders called FirstNet. So the first company that was assigned this was AT&T, and so if you're a first responder in Los Altos, which includes the police department and many of our group as well, you can switch your cell responder so you get a dedicated channel for first responders. So I think many of the certs and hams have started to work to get their cell phones in that direction. So their phones may work longer than most of the public will. The other side is that the whole point of ham radios is that we are planning that all of the infrastructure will die and that ours will not, because we are battery operated and we will be able to communicate. So if you see us wandering around in our yellow vest, we can almost certainly get you there. And in an emergency, if we really had this, our EARS sites, our emergency information reporting sites, which will be located in 11 zones in the city, can all send email. So if you haven't been able to get a hold of your parents or your children in Minneapolis, we can send an email for you.
And I do know for obviously that covers our first responders and our disaster service workers, right? We have that preferred network, which is important for us to be able to communicate. As far as for just where you're talking about your vendors and not being able to use credit cards and things of that nature, I know that there is trouble in the downtown and different regions of Los Altos with some cell phone coverage when things get crowded. There's a balance, and there's this give and take of cell companies want to put up more towers. They want to put up a lot more towers in order to improve that, but that also comes against some of the values of our city, right? To and health and wellness of the people where these towers want to be placed. So there's the give and take of wanting to have better cell service, but also worrying about the health and safety of residents who don't want these cell towers next to their homes. So that's part of the reason, I believe.
Well, and I just wanted to follow up there on Katie. I'm not as concerned about my vendors. I certainly am, them getting cell service. The question here really was about emergency services during the festival. What happens if somebody, it does the cell phone that says emergency call only actually work? I've never tried to call 911. So that's good to know. Yeah.
So what the cell phones do is that when they have too much traffic for concerts, festivals, things of that nature, and they have too many people trying to use the regular cell networks. And so it only allows it to go to 911. That's the emergency call only, because they don't want to not allow someone to call 911. So if there's an emergency, you can still push that and it'll go through to 911. And again, all of our Los Altos officers have FirstNet phones. So that we have that preferred network, as do our certs and hams if they've chosen to subscribe to that. But our work phones are all through FirstNet. So we have a dedicated line that allows us to communicate through that system.
That's very good to know. And Freddie, you're up next, and then Gary.
You're muted.
Thank you. I'm a cert, and I took my long course to get certified as a cert during the pandemic, and so I took it online, but I did do the in-person training with the Los Altos Hills Fire Department. What I'm wondering is when you get the replacement for Ann Heppenstall, when you get the new emergency manager, will you be able to offer more in-person training? And, so for example, I have signed up for the full-blown course again in September in Los Gatos because it seems to be the only opportunity for more in-person training. And I think it's really important, especially for the first aid and medical parts of your CERT training, to have a lot of refresher in-person opportunities. So could you tell me what's coming down the line? So, and are we going to have more opportunities for in-person training?
Yes, that's our goal when we get the next person on board, is to bring more trainings in. Anne was great about getting trainings in. Resilient Los Altos did a ton of trainings during COVID virtually, and they are starting to bring back some of the in-person trainings as well. So yes, that is our goal, is to get those trainings back, not only to have our own CERT Academy, hopefully, which I know we did one recently, but also just the Stop the Bleed classes, basic first aid, CPR. So that is our goal. Thank you, Freddie.
And we agree. We've done a lot of training through the pandemic, but most of it's been Zoom related, which we found to be actually well attended because people have very busy schedules. So it turns out if you have to take an hour to take a Zoom class, it only takes you an hour because you don't have to travel anybody to take it and come back. But we miss the interpersonal activities as well. We're actually in the process right now of setting up the next inspiration session. For those of you who have been involved in emergency prep in Los Altos for a while, you know that 4 or 5 years ago we were having these inspiration sessions led by Sherry Dodsworth, and we're starting to think about how we can get those going again.
And don't you have an upcoming training for new BAT CERT ham people?
We do. Those are Zoom classes, and
Oh,
maybe
those are Zoom classes.
talk about
Okay.
that for a minute. It's a total of 4 classes talking about various aspects of being a bat, and we don't teach you how to be a CERT or a ham, but we teach you how to use radios and how to respond in disasters. One of the things that we've done is the city has given us or has granted us money from time to time, and we have what are called the whoosh kits that we mentioned a while ago. If you attend the radio communications class, and then you're a resident of Los Altos, we will give you a pair of GMRS radios that allow you to communicate and eventually to be able to hear. The city will be we will be broadcasting on an hourly basis in a bad situation, so that people can hear what's going on from a trusted source. But if you take all 4 classes and participate in one drill, we'll give you a whoosh kit. That's about over $100 worth of stuff in a pack that you can easily keep under your bed with your shoes.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Gary, and unmute. There you go.
The March storm was really windy and it knocked down a lot of trees, as everybody knows. And that really was the thing that caused all the delays and a lot of the damage that we personally felt, including my backyard fence. I'm happy to hear that the trees assessment is taking place by Public Works, and that's important. And hopefully the trees get replaced by more appropriate trees and not redwoods like the ones which is still included in the city's list. But my question is there an effort or thought, and it's going to be expensive, but to put all the wiring underground?
That I don't know, because that I believe it's through PG&E, and I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure on that. That's not my area of expertise. That would be more maybe Nick Zorin's Department of Development Services, our sustainability coordinator at the city might have that information. At the PDI, I'm not sure where that stands.
I think I have a little bit of input for you. So I have a cabin up in Placer County, and the PG&E is burying wire everywhere they can if you're in a level 2 or level 3 fire zone. So their focus is on level 2 and level 3. That's not Los Altos. And it will be insanely expensive when they finally decide to do it. So I wouldn't be expecting it to happen anytime soon.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I know and some of you may need to leave right at 9:30, but before you go, I have 4 announcements. One is that our next meeting will be on Friday, June 2nd from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m., also via Zoom. Please join us for a discussion on the city's new zero-based budget process and its effect on city projects with our city manager, Gabe England. And number 2, if you would like to be added to the LACC mailing list, that's the coalition mailing list. Kim has just put the information in the chat. Send an email to info@Los Altos Community Coalition. Again, no spaces, all lowercase, .org. This email is posted in the chat for your convenience. And third, Los Altos Community Coalition will be on summer recess from July 1st through August 24th. Our next program will be on, after June, will be on August 24th. The City Council also will be on break from July 12th to August 21st. And that's why we time our break to coincide with that of the City Council. And lastly, a big thank you to the Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation for providing Los Altos Community Coalition with financial and in-kind support. Please join me in thanking Katie Krauss and Art Whipple for a great discussion today. We look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks.
Great. Thank you.
And I guess I'll thank you this way.
I-
Gary,
I-
your hand is still up. Do you have another question or is that okay?
He was clapping.
So I see there's one question in the chat about what's in the whoosh kit. And Harry, I see you've turned off your video. Are you actually there? Harry Guy? Here he is.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah,
off the top of the head tell me, go through what's in the whoosh kit quickly?
yeah, I was pulling up the PowerPoint picture I have of it, and but I probably can't screen share. But it's let me pull it up again and read it off quickly. Okay, well, it's got some first aid things. So roller gauze, 2x2s, 4x4s, Coban, a few things like that. A couple of space blankets, couple of triangular bandages. It's got a solar light and power bank to charge your stuff and recharge by solar, a headlamp, a whistle, and a thumb drive. Probably, to me, the most important thing in the whoosh kit is the thumb drive, because you can put all of your important electronic information, your documents, on that thumb drive and have it available. So you grab this thing. If you got 15 seconds to get out of your house, you grab it and go.
Is that, so I think it was Ginny that asked that question. Does that help you out, Ginny?
She waved yes, I guess.
And if you go to that class, then you get part of those kit things already given to you by
Yeah,
Art.
the whole kit actually in a bag and it's all ready to go. So
Add your shoes.
spend
We don't
4
give you
hours
shoes.
with us. Yeah.
So it looks like Tom Freed has his hand raised.
Yes, very, very briefly, based on what both Harry and Art just talked about, when you have this whoosh bag, or I call it the go bag and a stay box, based on how much time and material you saved, don't forget to check it at least twice a year so that your batteries don't ruin all of your flashlights and radios. It's amazing how gruesome that is when you open it up and nothing comes out but white flakes. So that's just a hint. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you so much. Well, I think we're a little bit over. So thank you, everyone, and see you all in 2 weeks.
Great.
Great.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Art. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Here.
Thank you. Great meeting.